Moser Beach is a favorite spot for photographers and filmmakers because of its breathtaking beaches and beautiful bodies. The successful model Linda Sobek disappears here in 1995 on her way to a photo shoot. It is Linda's pictures that help her achieve her first success and ultimately shed light on the mystery of her disappearance. Moser Beach, California, just 15 miles south of Los Angeles. The sun, the sand, and the surfing attract the young and beautiful. Linda Sobek is 30, blonde actress and model. She lives very close to the beach promenade. She is a cheerleader for the Los Angeles Raiders football team and a popular model for bikinis, lingerie, and calendars. And she wants to be an actress. Because of her height of only 1.6 meters, she is too small and too athletic for the top fashion industry. But her good looks and shapely body still bring her plenty of orders. Linda accepted a last-minute photo shoot on the morning of November 16, 1995. She grabs a few clothes and leaves. She leaves a message for her mother that she will call her later. Nothing has been heard from her since. Don't worry, Linda has a lot to do. She's at work, some have suspected. But my mother said all the time, no, I know something's wrong. In the afternoon, Linda has an audition for the TV series, but she's not coming. Everyone knew that Linda didn't want to miss this audition. That's why her parents were worried and started searching for her intensively. The family distributed 53,000 flyers promising a $20,000 reward. He grabbed one of her address books and started calling all the girls. Obviously, Linda has gone against her own principles. No one knows where she is and no one knows the name of the photographer. Since this assignment is not going through the modeling agency, there is no information at all. 2 days later, a worker in Los Angeles National Park finds photos of a beautiful young woman in a garbage can. He likes the pictures. He put the pictures in his backpack and went home. He only remembered them again on Monday evening, when he saw the TV coverage of the investigation. When he realized that they were photos of the missing model, he immediately called the police. 2 years earlier, the remains of a skeleton had been found nearby. The bones belonged to the blonde 20-year-old model Kimberly Pentelius. Kim had also accepted an appointment with an unknown photographer at short notice. Her murder case was never solved. The thought that Linda is somewhere in the national park is disheartening. The area covers around 2,000 square kilometers. A few days after Linda's disappearance, a freelance photographer named Charles Reed contacts the police with information. Charles says that he was with Linda in a Dennis restaurant on the morning of the disappearance. They had talked about her photo portfolio. At the end of the meeting, they separated. They each went their own way. Linda's car is found in the parking lot of the restaurant. The investigations carried out on the vehicle provide no evidence of a crime, but the police are still suspicious. The items found in the garbage can include Linda's photos and diary, as well as a rental contract for a Lexus. The name on the document is Charles Reed. Charles suspects that the rental agreement accidentally got into Linda's folder during their morning meeting. That same day, the photographer takes pictures of the Lexus for Auto magazine and returns the car the next day. Although the rental car is thoroughly washed inside and out, the police find several traces. There is a suspicious red stain on the back seat. The test shows that it is a blood stain. Further tests prove that it is human blood. In addition to blood, saliva residue is also found on the hood. With no further clues, the investigators continue to focus on the Lexus. Was the car near where Linda's photos were found? First, we smear a car tire with Vaseline and roll it over a piece of cardboard. Then we use a magnetic imprint powder to make the tire track visible on the cardboard. The same imprint of the tire tread appears on the cardboard that must have been left at the place we are looking for. But finding a tire imprint in an area of over 2,000 square kilometers seems hopeless. Unsurprisingly, Charles is questioned again, and this time he tells a different version of his story. He claims that he booked Linda to photograph her in and with the Lexus. They drove to Elmira, a dry riverbed about 2 hours north of Moser Beach. Linda's job was to drive the car in small circles while Charles took his photos. The photographer demonstrates the maneuver to Linda. Charles testifies, suddenly he lost control of the car, accidentally rammed the model and killed her in the process. According to his statement, he panics. He stows Linda's body in the back seat of the car and drives to a remote area in the national park. There he buries Linda's body. He was very vague and kept saying, "I can't remember." He burst into tears and said, "I'm not sure where she is, but I can take her." The Lexus has no external damage that would indicate an accident, so the officers are hoping to find Linda alive. They urge Charles to lead them to her grave, but the search is unsuccessful. He played us for fools. He knew exactly where she was. He was playing for time so that Linda's body would decompose before they found it. The investigators press Charles again to reveal more. This time they search the area with a helicopter. After several unsuccessful attempts, Charles finally leads them to Linda's body. She lies in a grave 60 centimeters deep. Nearby, the Lexus left tire imprint is found in the soft sand. Surprisingly, her body was completely intact. As she had already been buried for 9 days, I had no hope that there was any soft tissue left for a diagnosis. But there was, and that surprised me. The autopsy will now clarify the cause of death and the question, was it an accident or murder? Linda Sobek's autopsy reveals a lot of information about her death. Apart from a few bloodstains above her right ear, her body shows no typical injuries from a car accident. The alcohol content in her blood is 1.3 per ml, and she did not die in a car accident, as Charles claims, but by suffocation. She fought back. She had bleeding in her lungs, throat and eyes, which are typical signs of a person struggling against asphyxiation. She was fully conscious and fighting for her life. Strangling or suffocating the victim is the most common method of killing used by rapists. This leaves typical marks. A post-mortem examination is, of course, primarily concerned with the question of third-party culpability, and the simplest influence is external violence. That's why we naturally look at the body from head to toe, especially for hematomas, in order to be able to draw conclusions about the force applied, the intensity of blows, for example. We also look for special tool-related marks, such as those left on the neck by hand strangulation. Traces that are also found on Linda Sobek's neck in the form of hematomas. If the hematomas are only located in the subcutaneous fatty tissue, the violence was rather superficial. However, we also have hematomas that extend to the muscles surrounding the larynx, for example, in the case of violence to the neck during strangulation. And there are other marks, bruises, a twisted wrist and ankle marks on her ankles. This indicates that her legs were forcibly spread apart and held in this position. She struggled against it because there were abrasions on her legs that indicate a struggle, and it appeared that Linda's body had been washed. She wasn't wearing makeup, and it appears that her clothes had been changed before she was buried. I call this a girl thing, but the fit of her clothes confused me. The zipper was closed up to the neck. That surprised me because it's not normal. Most women open their dresses much further. That was an unusual position. There is also evidence of forced anal intercourse. A look into Charles's past reveals changeable traits that have cost him a few jobs. He can be very personable and charming, but just as quickly loses his patience and blows up, throwing objects around during shoots. He can be very polite and friendly with the models, and the next minute he's behind his camera saying derogatory things about them. A few years earlier, Charles had been arrested in Columbus, Ohio. He was accused of raping a female co-worker. Charles claims that the sex was consensual. He was acquitted. A search of his house revealed a collection of over 200 weapons. Of particular interest is a semi-automatic 45mm pistol. The weapon was examined for traces of blood. An expert suspected that the weapon had been used to abuse the victim. In such a test, the weapon is first examined under normal room lighting. No blood was found. But when the gun was then treated with chemical agents and a blood test was carried out, I clearly discovered blood on the breech at the top of the gun. Well, we found a lot of evidence in his house and learned a lot from talking to his friends. He didn't like blonde women. He referred to Linda as a little bitch who was difficult to work with. Charles Reed is arrested and charged with forced anal intercourse with an object and murder. Charles Reed continues to claim that Linda's death was an accident. Linda had been drinking heavily that day, and after he accidentally hit her with the Lexus, she began kicking and screaming. In trying to restrain her, he inadvertently choked her. It is completely absurd to assume that she would have been drinking during the photo shoot, especially when you consider that she had an interview with a TV station that evening, which she didn't want to jeopardize under any circumstances. Then Charles drops the bombshell. He claims that the sexual encounter with Linda that day was not forcible, but consensual. They had had sex with each other before the car accident happened. There were nude photos to prove this. The defendant told his brother Robert Reed that there were still pictures in the desert that would prove his innocence and Linda's consent to sex. He drew him directions on where to find the movies. The brother and his girlfriend drove into the mountains to retrieve the rolls of film that had been exposed to the sun, wind, and rain for months in the desert. Robert Reed actually finds 5 films, but instead of handing them over to the police, he develops them himself. 4 rolls contain pictures of Linda, in which she poses in 2 different outfits. In some of the pictures, Linda's clothes look messy, and there is a hole in her tights. Did Linda really volunteer to be photographed? The 5th roll is water-damaged, double-exposed, and pornographic. 12 were of the dashboard of the car, and 11 pornographic ones of female genitals. No head, face, or body was visible. The pictures were blurred by the water damage, which made them so mysterious. We could only recognize parts of the photos. According to the defense, these photos indicated that Linda Sobek was actually having voluntary sex with the defendant on the day she disappeared and died. But do the pictures really show Linda Sobek? The photos are enlarged in the police laboratory and at the same time at an aerospace company. The Aerospace Corporation scanned the photos and assisted me for 3 days as I scrutinized each pixel for meaning. You can see some parts of the car's dashboard in the background, but the logo on the steering wheel is not that of a Lexus. It's an Oldsmobile prototype that was photographed as part of an earlier project. The steering wheel of the car in question has a completely different logo to the Lexus, and the cruise control on the steering wheel is also something that the Lexus does not have. Do the nude photos still show Linda? The investigators compare the model photos with the autopsy photos. It was clear that this was not Linda Sobek, and the pictures in no way indicated voluntary sex. The dress and the car seats did not match. The hands in the pictures look male and do not match those of the victim. And the list goes on. And the prosecution doesn't believe Charles Reed's accident scenario. She suspects when Charles took his photos that day. It's just a job for Linda, but an opportunity for Charles Reed. The forensic findings prove that Charles hit Linda on the head, twisted her arm, tied her ankles, and sexually abused her, possibly with his gun. He probably also forced her to drink the alcohol. The severe bruising on her ankles indicates that Linda was desperately trying to escape. After Charles abuses Linda, he suffocates her. Linda's blood and saliva are found on the cover for the storage compartment. Charles Reed washes her face and changes her clothes to hide what really happened. He later throws Linda's personal belongings in the garbage can, but makes the mistake of forgetting the rental agreement for the Lexus with his signature on it. Charles Reed is found guilty of murder and sexual abuse and sentenced to life in prison without parole. I believe that Charles Reed did not develop emotionally after the age of 18 and is therefore unable to deal with rejection from a woman. His reactions were inappropriate and ranged from stupid comments to sexual advances, touching, and even rape, culminating in Linda's murder. The forensic evidence was very important in this case. The images he wanted to use in his defense and salvation actually brought about his conviction. The Sobek family is demanding that the brother Robert Reed be punished for obtaining the false evidence. Robert admitted on the witness stand that he had torn up the directions his brother had drawn to help him find the films. He confessed and took the blame voluntarily. Prosecutors suspect that Charles Reed may also have had something to do with the death of Kimberly Pentelius. Kim had also met an unidentified photographer at a Dennis restaurant the day she disappeared, and her remains were found just a few miles from Linda Sobek's body. To this day, no one has been prosecuted for the murder of Kim Pentelius.